Hi, this is the Magnificent Midlife Podcast, and I'm Rachel Lancaster. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started, and the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife, about issues that matter, and sharing fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now is our time. My guest today is Laura Galloway, and she is the author of Dalvi, 6 Years in the Arctic Tundra. She's a writer and communications strategist who began her career at the Los Angeles Times, and she holds a Master of Arts in Indigenous Journalism from the Sámi University in Kautokeino, Norway. I read about Laura in a magazine, and I just knew I had to invite her onto the podcast. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It's really a pleasure to be here.
Now, I'm just very excited. As I told you before I hit record, I've just finished your book, absolutely loved it. You have lived in some incredibly busy places and some very remote ones. So what's it like now living in the English countryside?
I love it. It's actually the perfect mix of city and country. It's very nice to be able to take a train into a major city if I want to, but to also have the quiet, bucolic nature in front of me every day.
Must be very different though, surely, from the Arctic Tundra.
It is. It's much easier to find a latte.
Excellent. And what does Dalvi mean? What does it actually mean?
Dalvi is the northern Sámi word for winter.
So why did you call it that, and why did you write the book?
Well, I called it Dalvi because I wanted for the world to have a Sámi language word, because I think it will make people more aware that the language exists. And unfortunately, a lot of Sámi words are really difficult to pronounce, and my publisher wouldn't let me go with another month. But also, in all seriousness, I decided to call it that because winter has had such a profound impact on my life. It's when my mother died when I was a little girl, which set off my whole search for connection and meaning, kind of a theme in the back of my life for my entire life. And it was also a place that when I moved to the north, the winter is the time when you really have to learn how to do things differently. And so that's why I came up with that title for the book. And I wrote the book. I hadn't intended to write a book, but when I was nearing the end of my time in Norway, I realized I had been doing a lot of reflection about my time there and what it meant, and in the bigger picture and context of my life. And I think memoirs are the greatest act of self-reflection that you can make externally. And so I decided to start writing a book, mostly because I wanted to share this magical place with the rest of the world. But as it turned out, it was really also to unpack and explain to readers what led me to that place and what led someone to make such an enormous jump from living in big, huge cities with a successful job in midlife to unvarnishing everything, basically.
Yeah, it was a massive, massive leap, wasn't it? And I think one of the beautiful things about the book is the way you do uncover the history alongside what's going for you in the present, as in your existence in where you are in Norway. And looking back, I think that's really, really powerful. And actually, I was really struck and moved by the difficulties of your childhood. I mean, it was profound, actually. And I found myself really affected by it, actually.
Oh, gosh.
And how did you write that so openly, I suppose? It must have been quite difficult to go to that intensity of feeling and to write about it. And we all know writing is a very vulnerable experience, but this in particular must have been like super vulnerable, I reckon.
Well, I feel it's funny. This came up the other day with a friend who had lost a parent at an early age. And I said, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And he said to me, well, it happened 30 years ago. So I've reconciled myself. And I think really that's sort of with my mother dying and then my father remarried, a woman that I desperately, desperately wanted her to love me. And I was never really accepted as her daughter, and I don't think it's not a Cinderella story. I think it's much more complicated story than that. Um, as parent and adoptive or step parent stories are, but I had been living with it for such a long time. But I think I think I probably never said this in an interview before, but I think it's coming up for me now that I when people in your family don't acknowledge that such craziness existed or are willing to put it away into the corner, then you start to question whether or not, that then it normalizes it. And for me, I needed to actually say, I have to write this stuff down, because it really did motivate and influence every decision I made in my life.
And how was it writing about people who hurt you who are still alive?
Well, um, it's not for the faint of heart. I think that some of the people didn't see the book at all, and some were very happy about it, and some were very unhappy about it. But everybody's names were changed and locations were changed, and everyone is entitled to telling their own story, I think. And at the end of the day, that's what is important. And also, your experiences are central to who you are. And
Mm.
so it was a risk I had to take. And I think that was also part of my emancipation, if you will, that I could finally say, this is the story of my life. And this informed a lot of decisions that I made. And I will say that at the end, the conclusion I come to is that nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect. Nobody in my family or anyone's family is perfect. Um, and at the end of the day, I do have love for everyone in my family. It's just we're all trying to learn, aren't we, as we go along?
We absolutely are, yeah, and we're all the product of our own upbringing, aren't we? If we can, and I
Mm.
think you came to that conclusion towards the end of the book, didn't you? That you could then look at people with different eyes and see that they must have had something awful happen to them to make them the way that they were. Um, we all carry that, don't we? We carry our history with us.
Yes.
But and I thought it was interesting when it wasn't until you said Cinderella that I thought, oh crikey, yes, I hadn't actually made that connection. Oh my goodness me. Yeah, because it absolutely kind of is, isn't it? But it's also very strange because I am a stepmother, and to read that in the book, I found really distressing. I just wanted to slap her.
No, I do too. My partner now has two teenage children, and I can't imagine. But again, I think if you use your childhood as a growth opportunity, you try to use that to recognize what you don't want to be and what you do want to be to others. But I will say, I read a really brilliant quote, from someone. I don't know who to attribute this to, but childhood trauma is the gateway drug or the gateway to all problems. It really is.
Yeah.
Um, on an individual and on a societal level, if you
And we
take
pay for it all our lives, don't we? It's like this,
right,
yeah,
right,
and
right.
how to move on from it. And you moved on from it in a kind of extreme way. So let's look at you. So was it reaching sort of rock bottom, do you think? Did you feel that actually gave you the impetus to move halfway across the world to one of the most inhospitable and remote places on the planet?
Well, I would say that I didn't have an actual rock bottom moment, but I would say a rock bottom period in my life where all the things that I thought had made up my identity were sort of slipping away. So I had a very successful career in New York as a media consultant. I used to be the head of communications for the TED conferences as they grew very big in the world, and working with a lot of really interesting people. But then my major client got gigantic, and I didn't want to grow a bigger firm. And so my identity was no longer being a well known media strategist in New York. And I had gone through a pretty rough and unexpected divorce to a man that was much older than I was. And so it lost my footing with that. So that wasn't my identity anymore. And then a lot was coming up in my family, all of the discord and rivalries and things that had sort of started to grow in my childhood were rearing their heads with as my father and mother were getting older. And so all these things were happening at once, and I didn't feel like I had a place anywhere in the world, and I didn't know what to do. And I just knew that the life I had wasn't working anymore. And shortly, before all of this started happening, I had taken a very nascent DNA test from a company that I probably won't name because they all do the same thing now. But it suggested, now this was 10 years ago, that I had some affiliation to the Sámi people. And those are the indigenous inhabitants of Arctic Sweden, Norway, Finland, and the Kola Peninsula of Russia. And I'm just explaining that because a lot of people don't understand that these countries have a very vital indigenous population. I couldn't believe this result saying that I had some affiliation to them, and I started asking friends in Stockholm about it, and they said, "Oh, do you have to?" And this is very distant DNA, by the way. This is not finding out that my real mother was a Sámi woman or something. But I probably regarded that result with more than curiosity, because if you grow up as a kind of an outsider, always being told you're not someone's real child, or you don't belong, or seeing your siblings sent away, I was always searching for a sense of home and connection and safety. And how else can, the unassailable fact of science, that I would have this connection. So that sort of rocket launched me to starting to take a lot of trips to that part of the world. And I loved it there because it was completely different than the life I was leading in New York. Busy, concrete jungle, running, 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 keeping up. You're in midlife. You're supposed to be at the apex of everything you're doing. Can't slow down. And then I'd go to the Arctic, and my cell phone wouldn't work, and it was cold and snowy and empty, and you'd nothing to do for the days, when it was dark and polar night. And I loved it. So eventually I went to a Sámi wedding and met a reindeer herder, as one does, called Ailu in my book. And we started a relationship, and I kept going back to the Arctic, and finally thought life in New York wasn't sustainable anymore. So I took the decision to go without knowing how long I would stay or what I would do. I only knew that I had to take my cats, put my stuff in storage, and went to the Arctic. And started doing consulting work there on Skype a little bit. And I started learning Sámi language. And then in my first winter, the reindeer herder left me. He just sent me a message saying, "Go back to New York, I'm leaving." And that was a pivotal point in my journey, because I had to decide if I stay or go, and I stayed.
And why did you stay? Because you had this reason to go at that stage, and then you ended up staying for another 5.5 years, didn't you? Which is
Yes,
amazing, really.
I stayed because there was an incredible feeling uh, in that part of the world. First of all, I have to say that Sámi people are very modern, but they're very interesting in that they live in modern cultures and have faster internet than we do in England or the US. And, but they also have those live side by side with very traditional ways. Like for the reindeer herding Sámi, everybody participates in the herding of the reindeer, and reindeer meat and drinking coffee in a lavvu, or a tent in the back of your garden. Um, I I found so many things in this little village so different, and there was no manual for how to sort of get along in this place. And there was something exhilarating in my 40s about being able to be in a place usually in the midlife you've done everything basically, or you go to any city now and
No, no, no,
no,
no, no,
well, you know what
no.
I mean. When you
The
travel,
media likes to tell you have.
you're going to see when you travel, you're going to see McDonald's, and you know you're going to find a cash point, and you know blah, and somebody's going to speak English, and it's all very sort of the same. You know,
Yeah,
when I was younger and started traveling, you would have to write a letter, send a postcard, spend a try not know where you were going to stay where you went somewhere because you just we didn't have the internet and
yeah,
and
yeah.
so this was an amazing feeling of I don't know anything here and I need to learn and it's a challenge and my heart was broken. I will not lie. That was tough, but I thought I'd come all this way and usually my reaction in life would be just to say, okay, fine, you know, go back to New York, but I didn't feel like I could go back to New York. It wasn't a life that fit for me anymore. So I stayed.
Yeah, such a brave thing to do, and I think really so many things that stood out in the book for me, but the fact that, it took so long for you to be accepted. It took so long for you to just be even acknowledged where you were living, as a part of the community, and it felt almost as if by the time you left, you had been embraced by the community, but it took an awfully long time, didn't it? And while you had been embraced by the family of Ilu, as soon as he left, you lost all the family as well, so you lost everything. You lost all
Yeah.
of the support network, which
Yeah.
bizarrely was very reminiscent of what you'd lost in America. That you'd kind of
Wow.
lost all of that support network there as well, and it was just taken away from you. So I guess you were able to go, "Okay, been here before. I can do this."
Actually, it's a great,
But
Rachel, it's a very
hard.
good point. I'd never thought of it that way, but I guess that's true. And maybe I wanted to change the tune of my own record. And I did that. I wasn't conscious of doing that at the time. I do have to say, I think it's very northern, not Sami, but northern and Scandinavian to take a long time to sort of get to know people before I'm American, so I've just met you and I want to be your best friend. And if anybody's ever seen that show, Ted Lasso, that is the greatest
Oh,
show
yeah.
ever because
It's
that's
brilliant.
completely, my partner calls me Laura Lasso because hi, you're walking the dogs. I think I scare British people too. And so this is a much different way of getting to know people, but I will say that the people that I met in the North were the greatest people that I've ever met. They will be there for you your entire life, help you through anything. They don't throw themselves on you, and it takes time for them to know really who you are, not what you do, not how much money you have, um, not what your title is. And that's a really special thing, and it's really foreign. I think in my American culture, it's a really foreign thing.
It's really interesting because I've lived in the States, I've lived in New York, and, one of the things that I have noticed culturally differently was when I was in New York, it was very easy for me to make friends. I just had to open my mouth and people came to me. They just heard me talk and it was like, "Oh my god, I have to talk to this woman." Um, and I had a child in kindergarten, so I met lots of parents,
Yeah.
and I'm very lucky that several of those are still my friends now, and he's in
Yes.
his mid-20s, so it was a long time ago. But I do think, like with the British, we take a long time to make friends often, but I do think once we've made friends, we are friends for a long time. You've got to do something, well, certainly in my world, you've got to do
Yeah.
something really bad to stop being my friend, if you know what I
Yes.
mean.
Yes. Yes. Agreed. And then multiply that times point times a thousand, the Nordic sort of way of I would say Norway. I can't speak for all the Nordics. I lived in Norway, but um, that was my experience. So
Mm. And it was so interesting as well when I heard, you talk in the book, people were talking about going south and going to Tromsø, and that is the furthest north I've been. Well, I have actually. I've been to. No, I did go to the Globe, which was the edge of the Arctic. Is that Tromsø or is that a little bit higher
Oh,
up? I
that
can't
was,
remember.
I can't remember the name of the place now. I wanna say that, so I know what you're talking about, I see it in my
I
head,
went
but
on a cruise up the fjords with my mum a few years ago,
oh,
and, but it
nice.
was so funny to hear you talking about, people moving south. And it was like, "No, these places are incredibly far north, but this is just another north that we're talking about."
Right. Yes, very far away.
Very, very far away. So, what do you miss about that place now that you're not there?
Uh, I mi the thing that I miss the most, I miss the nature. I do miss the nature quite a bit. And I do love winter. And I miss a reindeer herding dog that belonged to a reindeer herder that lived across the street from us. And his name was Rane Rune. And I never got
Ranny Ri yes, and he followed you all the time, didn't he?
and
And
I
he just
never
used
got
to
to
come
say
and
bye to
camp
him.
out.
And I have a framed picture of him in our lounge, like along with family
Oh,
pictures. And I miss this dog beyond measure. So um, I miss him a lot.
because one of the things you were another thing you talk about is the difference in how we over sentimentalize animals to a certain extent, and where you were living, they don't, because certainly the dogs are working animals. And I was fascinated to hear that you can't you can't neuter animals in Norway.
That's
That was
Norwegian.
just
You can, but it's very difficult to
very hard. Yeah,
alter
it's
an
not
animal.
standard thing. In fact, it's
Right.
frowned on, isn't it? That was
Yes. That is Norwegian and not really, and by default that would make it Sami Norwegian, but that's just sort of the way that people regard animals. And so there are a lot of puppies that are born, and I'm a lifelong spay and neuter. How do you call it? What do you say in the UK?
we spay a
Alter,
cat.
and you for
We don't
dogs?
s we neuter a dog, I think, and we spay a cat. Have I
Okay,
got that
right.
right? I don't know,
That
something like
should be
that.
right. Something like that. Anyway, I come from a background where you're an irresponsible pet owner unless you do that. So it was
Yes,
a
here
really,
that's
really big
mm,
adjustment for me to be in a place where I had to, really, really fight to get my first dog. She's a female spayed. And I still my her sister is still now in England, will be fixed here. So
yeah. But you have an uncanny ability to bring communities, landscapes, peoples, and animals to life. That was a beautiful part
ah,
of the book. So
thanks, Rachel. I
definitely
appreciate that.
hats off to you for that. I mean, it was so evocative. And I think also what you want to do is you really want to communicate to the world about the Sami people, don't you? And I think the book will do that because people will want to go. I will want now. I won't want to just go up to Tromsø. I want to go further and find out what's up there further on.
Yeah, it's a fascinating and beautiful part of the world. And I wanted to say that I noticed in the UK that a lot of people refer to Sami people as Laplanders. So if you ever hear
Ah,
people saying they're going to, I hear a lot of people say, "Oh yes, I went to Rovaniemi in Finland," or something like that, or the Father Christmas taught place. These are Sami areas, and you can easily find Sami people. A Sami person will tell you, if you ask them, I would say that I'm an American, and you would say that you're British, I would assume. Sami people will say, I'm Sami from the Finnish side, I'm Sami from the Norwegian side, I'm Sami from the Swedish side, because they inhabit an area that predates all of those modern country borders. And so the
mm,
home area of the Sami is called Sapmi. So
Sapni. So that's what we
Sapmi,
should be saying.
Sapmi, S-A, yes,
Sapmi.
Sapmi, yes. And so that is, so a Sami person will say, I am a Sami, but then you'll say from what they'll tell you which side, meaning what modern country they live in. So they really have two identities. And I always think it's fascinating in Norway how people don't realize that the country has two official languages, one of which is Sámi language. So
Mm-hmm.
you can get your driver's license in Sámi. You could do any of your municipal services in Sámi. The village that I lived in, because they're in a huge period of language revitalization. Two of the key ways that you do that is to have Sámi media. So there are Sámi TV and radio stations and newspapers. The kids are taught in Sámi. I was a teacher to the reindeer herders at Sámi at the reindeer herding high, which is really a place.
It's just brilliant.
So,
Honestly, it's so amazing. I think it's so amazing what you've done and what you've created. And I think, yeah, you're going to be just the Sámi ambassador now, aren't you? You're going to be telling the world about the Sámi because we
oh,
need to know. I had
and I
no
have to
idea there were
say,
two official languages in Norway.
there absolutely are. And I do have
Yeah.
to say, spoiler alert, there's a whole chapter in my book that that is titled "I Am Not a Sámi," because the DNA is so distant and tangential, and I took it so long ago. I mean, it's completely ridiculous. And I think that your lived culture is what makes you who you are. I tell people all the time that one of my great grandmothers on my mother's side actually came from the West Midlands. But when I moved to England, I was complete fish out of water because I didn't, our cultures are different, although we share a basically common language. So.
Well, I'm from the Midlands too, so we're probably second cousins. There you go.
Great. Dudley, that's where my people are from.
You're from Dudley? I'm from Birmingham. I don't think I've ever done a Brummie accent on the podcast before. There you go, podcast listeners. That's Rachel talking in a Birmingham Midlands accent.
I'm learning all the accents, and it's really tough going.
Oh, you're from Dudley. How funny.
Well, I have a
well,
great
your great grandma,
from...
yes.
I've never been.
But didn't you have you've also got some sort of Italian on the other side as well or something?
The
Is that
great
right?
grand the great grand from Dudley married a man from the Austrian Alps. So I think I have a lot of family in the Dolomites, the Heidi country, we would say in America.
Brilliant. So there's a lot of pasta in your background as well then, eh? Oh my goodness. So you lived very, very simply in the Arctic, and I love that. I mean, I am a great fan of simple living. So what are some things that stayed with you?
I don't like having a lot of stuff now. I had so much stuff before, and so much of my life was about stuff. Big things, small things, food in the fridge that you have that you don't eat, clothing you don't wear. There's just this, fast fashion, all of this. There wasn't an opportunity for me to buy and do stuff, so my low impulse control in that couldn't be activated. And then you start realizing how much easier it is to sort of live without a lot of things that you don't need. And then also just in terms of food, I think there was a very big change for me. I write in the book about the first time that I came back to England. I was doing a work project and I had to go to London, and I went to one of the really, really big stores, the Whole Foods in Kensington. Whole Foods is like the holy grail for Americans. And I almost had a breakdown when I walked in because the store was so gigantic. And there was so much food, and you just knew that food was not all going to get sold. And you think about if you are around animals, you're around a reindeer, that they're killed very judiciously and very quickly, and every usable part is used. And then you look at giant meat counters at the Tesco or the Sainsbury or any store we have, and just doubly so in America. It's just too much. We don't need that much choice. We don't need that much, you know, I sound, the consumer culture. I love beautiful things, but this consumer culture has just gone way, I think, simplicity, having to pick the mushrooms that you're going to put in a stew, or catch the fish, or a reindeer that came from, a herder that this was really lovely to me.
Mm. And it makes such a difference as well when you've seen the animal killed that you're going to
Yes.
eat.
Yes.
Because we don't make, so often we just don't make that connection, do we, between the
No,
living animal and the meat on our plate?
that's right. We choose not to do that in many cases. And listen, I'm a Midwesterner, and in the United States, I grew up as you you eat meat and drink milk and do all of this. This is part. So people are completely entitled to their own choices. But for me, it was a complete reset about where I fit into things and what my impact on the world is. That really changed for me. And also because it sounds very silly, but it's just the ultimate truth for me that nature became my constant companion. I was walking in nature every day for hours. I lived around nature. And if you see the magnificent intricacy of nature and how every little piece works together so that another piece can survive. Mosquitoes came into the village in droves, annoying to people, but really important to feed all of the amazing birds that are in the area, and to send the reindeers down to the coast to a lower elevation where there was more of a breeze. And you start realizing your connectedness to everything, and then you don't want to. You want to have a simple footprint.
It's so important, isn't it? And I think it's
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
such a crucial message for the world, actually, that I think
yeah.
we've all got to stop consuming so much and look at what we've got and think about the origin of what we got all the time, really, because it's so
Yeah.
easy to forget, isn't it?
Yes, yes, very easy. Yep.
And I loved as well that you talked about loving winter. So what was it about winter that you loved? Because you were literally, was it 3 months of complete darkness? The sun
Yeah,
didn't come up at all?
I tell people, I'm not a body shamer, but I tell people, somebody said, "What happens in your first 24 hours, your first time being in that kind of a season?" And I said, "Well, I got very fat because because it's all of the things that we hear about the Scandinavian countries about hygge and kosling and being cozy and Scandi things. You wake up at 9 in the morning and it's totally, pitch black outside and the sun's nowhere coming. You just want to bake a loaf of bread and burn some candles and make a fire. But you can't, you can't. Eventually that catches up with you when the sun comes out again. But I love the coziness and the starkness of it. I think those things, I felt very cocooned in the landscape and very, very safe. And just simple things made me really, really happy to get firewood and to make a really good fire, or to take time to cook food very locally, or to read a book, or to walk all the time, even when it was really cold. But I read in my book that I love the cold because it lets you know you're alive, and beautiful things come with the cold, like the aurora borealis. And far more unsettling to me is the 24 hours of sun. That's a very tough thing to kind of get used to, in my experience.
So why was that more difficult?
Well, I think there's a lot of scientific research now. People are telling you, if you have sleep problems, to put away your screens and things before you go to bed and have a dark, quiet room. And I realize, I would surmise that this is because I experienced the Arctic version of this. You can't just be in your lounge where it's bright daylight outside at 2 in the morning and then say, I'm just going to go into the dark bedroom and fall asleep. You need really you need that gradation of light to get you it started to get ready to that for the idea of bed. So it's really, really harder to go to sleep. People don't sleep much in the summer. And because people really want to take advantage of the sun where where I lived, it can be 3 in the morning and kids are riding around on their bikes or jumping on trampolines because we lived in a very safe area. If I could wake up at 1 in the morning and say, oh, I think I'll take the dogs and go camping and fishing for 3 days,
Yeah.
and I'll set off at 1, and there's in the morning. And it's very discombobulating. And also the way of eating is that, there aren't meal times in the summer where I lived in the north. The parents will just put food out on the hob, and your job is to eat when you're hungry. But kids are very self-regulated, but they could be hungry at 4 in the morning. You know, I don't know how often that really happened, but this total lack of schedule was just sort of whoa, and you feel like you should be doing something.
Yeah, because it's light. But I love the fact that you said you could, yeah, you could go camping like that in the summer, and you didn't need to have a torch with you. You didn't need to light a fire at night. It was just, you could light a fire, but you didn't need to light a fire, and you didn't need to be
Right?
worried about where you were going, because you could see everything, which just
Yeah, yeah,
sounds amazing, really,
yes, completely amazing.
but also a bit spooky. But I think the thing also, it works with the circadian rhythms in the winter, because you've got no way of setting your circadian rhythm if it's pitch black at 9 o'clock in the morning. You can't you can't
Right,
get out and get some daylight.
exactly. And I think people, when you get really good at living in that kind of environment, it's all about setting a schedule. So saying, no matter what, I'm waking up at 8, no matter what, I'm exercising from 8:30 to 9:30. I'm eating a piece of, you know, te- bread at 10:30. I'm studying, I'm doing my job from this. You stay very regimented because you have to be able to do that so that you're just not completely. And of course, the reindeer herders are working all the time, so they don't have to worry about any of this. I'm just talking about what a New Yorker would do.
I loved it where you described that there was another American who turned up on your journalism course, and you thought that she was disappointed to find that she wasn't the only American in the entire area, let alone on the course.
Yeah. Yes. I definitely got that feeling that was sort of a what?
It's very funny, very interesting. But you made some super wonderful friendships there, didn't you? From a whole eclectic mix of people. So tell us a bit about those relationships that you built.
Well, a few of my really amazing friends I'll tell you about are a newspaper editor who just actually came to England a few days ago and stayed the weekend visiting, called Stein, spelled Stein, but in the Norwegian saying of it is Stein. And he actually was one of my first friends before I moved to Norway. And he lived a couple of hours away, and was one of the editors of Norway's largest Norwegian language Sámi newspaper. And he was just there for me at every critical moment. When I decided to stay and I told him I'd broken up with this reindeer herder, he quietly made the drive and, tucked money into my pocket and got me firewood and told me what I needed to know to survive. I mean, he has the most incredible knowledge of the region of anybody I've ever met. He's just a natural, knows everything about everyone because he's so curious, which was what I experienced when he came here and was asking everybody their complete story, from being in Brighton to the people at the chippy shop to the taxi driver to he was an amazing friend and teacher to me. And then my closest friends, Bjarne and Maya, a married couple who I write about in the book a lot, just were really special, amazing people to me and helped me no matter what. Just were very open people and I learned so much from them. And really everybody was incredible, but these folks, I write about a lot of the people that ended up being just really amazing, quietly amazing, always there, steadfast, loyal, fantastic.
Mm. And you'd managed to find people like that before as well, hadn't you? So despite your family being, I don't know, just this massive disappointment on every level, it seemed to me. I mean, I was just transfixed by the Supercut gang early on in
Oh
your life.
yes,
They, I mean, not Norway, I know, but they were just, and it was so lovely that initially they just dismissed you as the
yeah,
rich kid,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
and then they just took you under their collective wing, and they became your family, didn't they?
Yes. I should say that I do write in my book about my first summer job, which was at a Supercuts, and I got this job a little bit by, I don't want to say by mistake, but I was younger than I should have been to get that job, and I could ride my bike there, and I got a job as a receptionist. And the women ended up really becoming like a coven of sort of mothers and sisters to me, and people that really looked after me and encouraged me when I was offered a job in Los Angeles at the Times, starting as a copy messenger. They put their money together and they said, "You're going," and just really had the most generous hearts and spirits in the world. And we're really funny, amazing women that I'm so happy to still know. My editor said, "I want your next book to be about the ladies of Supercuts." So,
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah, all their different stories. Because there was one woman who gave you a ticket to Italy, didn't she? She gave you a
she
plane ticket to
did.
Italy.
Mary the flight attendant. Yes.
Yeah,
35
just
quid
brilliant.
that I had to stay a
Wow.
month.
But then you met somebody what knocked half off your bill, because
Yes.
they just thought you would, you needed some help and you needed someone to be nice to you. I love
Yes,
that. There were
kind of.
people there who just thought, "Want to be nice to this woman."
And
Yeah.
I'm still friends with all of those people in Italy. I did realize too, I think anybody should think about writing their own story, because you will see what a, just like in nature, what a web of people just show up for you when you need it. And that has been the experience of my life. So I this book gave me a lot of joy to write because I saw it in so many incredible people.
And do you think you'll ever go back?
I It's a good question. I'm not sure. Of course I'll go visit. Of course. And would love to do some summers there. And now that, I ended up driving to England from the Arctic with my two
I
reindeer
know.
herding dogs and two cats. I know what the drive entails. So if my partner will be game for it, then I could see us going and spending the summers there or something occasionally. But yeah, it's a part of the world I love. Yeah.
Yeah, it must be very difficult to extricate yourself completely when you've had such an immersive experience in a place. And I feel it's really got into you. It's under your skin, isn't it? That's very much about the
Hmm.
book. I think that
Hmm.
this is a place that's had such a huge impact on you.
Yes, it really has.
So if you were, I mean, you did this, you were quite young in midlife when you started to do this, but it was obviously a massive thing to do. What advice would you have for a woman who's, got a similar kind of itch and is thinking, shall I just jack it all in and just go somewhere and live a different life?
Well, I would have advice on two counts, and the first one would be to say that you have to be willing to expect the unexpected, and don't go with a don't make a pronouncement. I'm moving here for the rest of my life or whatever. Take it day by day, and figure out how you can do something, and then see where it goes. And believe that you can do it. We live in a world where it's possible to travel. You just need to consider things like language and visas and all of these things. The other thing is, I tried really hard to write in this book to be pretty transparent about money, because as much as I love books like Eat, Pray, Love and all of these midlife lady, movies where, like a playwright lives in a 50 million pound house in the Hamptons, which would not ever happen in real life, just like Sex in the City. Please. I tried to really write about how I went into a place of living very, very simply. And that is a nice way to exist, and it is a better way to exist. So I did not do all of this with a ton of money. I did it, and then I enrolled in school, and then I did a little bit of consulting, and then I had to find jobs in the area. So I went from being a really, big media executive to freelancing for the local newspaper to, like I wasn't buying things, taught English to the reindeer herders. So I think also you shouldn't think this is a pie in the sky. I mean, unless you have aspirations to move to Dubai and live in a hotel for, 6 years. But I lived very simply. And so you should really believe that you can do it and work it out. You have to be willing to sort of let go of ego, though, in terms of, I would never do that.
And what would you most like people to know about Sápmi?
Sápmi.
Sápmi.
It's an amazing part of the world, and if you end up going to go see Lapland and the Santa things, just know that there's this whole other incredible culture that's right there, and language, and just something completely fascinating that's in Europe that most people don't realize. And it's gorgeous, and the people are fantastic.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, follow, and share it. Also, giving a 5-star review really helps get the word out. You'll find the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you can get my book, Magnificent Midlife: Transform Your Middle Years, Menopause, and Beyond. Make the very best of your next chapter. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.